We're going to tie a pregnant scud. We begin with a 24 Tiemco 2457 in a size. This happens to be a 14. The bead I've got here is a 2mm tungsten bead, Xmas red, Christmas red from Lucent. The thread I'm using is 17-aught uni tricot in white. Hey, we've got the bead in right now up at the front end, just covering the shank of the hook with the thread. I've got it back to the back. I'm building a little bit of a bump. The bump's to lift the boar bristle or coq de leon fibers for my antenna. I'm going to tie those fibers in the back there. What's nice about the boar bristle is they are naturally split. So conceivably you could only just use one, it'll split, but I like to give it a little bit more mass, so I've got probably two pieces of boar bristle and they're split. And they'll split even into threes. So it'll be 3 little fibers coming off of there. But they're really nice. I really like them. And they're very strong. I'm going to take the boar bristle, try to keep it on the top of the hook, trim it off. Now I'm going to take my bead and move it back to the middle. That bead represents the pregnant portion. Some people say it's pregnant. Some say it's a virus in the scud. Now I'm going to take some 17-pound mono and melt it. And my trick with that is just take a piece that's about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch long and wave it through the middle section of the flame. What it does is it picks up some soot, and I get even, usually most guys are melting one side and then the other. I just wave it through and it comes out even every single time. And I keep it on the tweezers. The tweezers help me to place it onto the hook. I'll wave it through, right through that middle section. That's actually the hardest part of the flame. And see, I get those perfect eyes. They're balanced on both sides every time. Now I'm going to tie it in right where I tied in the coq de leon. Just going to figure 8 it. No big deal. Now I'm going to take my bead and move it into that middle section like I said earlier, and that's my pregnant portion of the egg, of the scud. And bring my thread back. Now I've got a piece of 1/8 inch wide latex rubber. This happens to be nymph scan. You can use anything. I'm just adding a little color where the base of where I built up that thread bump. Now cut a little taper. And that's so I don't get too much buildup at the tie-in point. Bring my thread up to the front. The reason I bring it up behind the eyes is that I'm going to use that to tie off my latex rubber. Now, I'm not going to try to do real nice overlapping wraps. I'm trying to build up the body a little bit, so I'll go over the top of it a couple times. I'm just trying to get it just about even with the top surface of that bead. So I wrap it a little thick. Now, I've got it pretty tight now. I'm going to bring it underneath the bead and bring it over to the other side of that bead, and I'll build it up there also. And bring that latex right behind the eyes. I want to keep it pretty tight right in there. I don't want to build up behind the eyes. Now, at this point, you got a lot of pressure on the latex, and you really want to wrap that down and tie that sucker off, because if it gets loose, it'll come apart, and you'll have to start all over again tying in the latex. So I'm tying in on both sides of that piece of latex to really nail it down. Now I'll hold a lot of tension on it and take those nippers and pull it, and so then I don't have a tag in that's left. It retracts back into itself. Now I'm going to bother to go ahead and tie it off. Now I've got two pieces of ostrich herl, and I'm going to fold them in half and tie them in right underneath the eyes. You're looking for ostrich herl that's got a strong stem and really long hairs on it. That's your key piece. So nowadays, you're very lucky to find ostrich that hasn't been burned. What I mean by burn is they take the ostrich and they bleach it so that they can add color to it. And in the process of bleaching it, they have a tendency to burn off too many of the hairs, and it gets really thin and real fine. It's a nice balance they can find where it can get white enough so that they can dye it, but not so white that it burns the fibers. And the same thing process too when they go to dye it. Sometimes they leave it in too long, or they just cook it way too long. Now my thread here has separated on me, and I'm just trying to get past that point. I also saw that I've lost some of the fibers, and so I'm actually building up the thread a little bit to get to a strong piece of the thread segment. So I'm tying in right underneath the eyes, below the eyes on the bottom. And I'm going to gather that ostrich herl into a pair of tweezers. Now, at this point, you can either use a pot's weave or just twist it and just wrap it underneath. I mean, and just bring it through to the back, and then run your thread through it to the back. This twisting really lets me get the legs really dense, and it makes it really, really strong. And then it just flares out nicely so that when you get that scud in the water, those hairs off of that ostrich herl really move really well. Even in a lake situation where you're letting it sit, any movement in the water will set those legs off. When I went to do this, I was going to just wrap the legs underneath, but it wasn't cooperating, so I ended up going with the pot's weave. But you can, the front section of this is I'm actually demonstrating two different techniques here. See, I'm not doing the pot's weave right here. I'm just trapping the ostrich herl on the bottom of the hook, or the bottom of the abdomen of the scud. At this point, I go to a pot's weave. I want a little bit more density. So I'm going around the ostrich herl once and then bringing it over the top. See, right around it and then bring it over the top. At the same time, I'm keeping tension on the legs to keep it on the bottom of the hook. So this is now a pot's weave. I learned this from watching my buddy's video, Mike Tucker, on his scud, and the Tucker scud. See, I'm still doing the pot's weave. So it's funny, I just used the trap it underneath on the front section of the scud, and now I'm using the pot's weave. As you can see, it's a mess, but I'm about to fix that as soon as we get these legs done. Trim it off and tie off that back end. Now, as you can see, those legs are all over the place, but that's not a problem. All you need to do is take your bodkin. First, I'm going to wet it with a little bit of saliva and push those hairs down so I know where everything's at. See, you're starting to see it really for fine. Now I'm going to take my bodkin and push those hairs back down where they should be. Now look on the other side, same thing. Just pushing those hairs underneath. And it's really easy to push underneath there. Now I've got a marker here, and this is Spanish olive. And I like this color. It's a tertiary color. And what happens is all that thread that went through there, the dyes in the marker actually migrate to it. They soak it up, and so it really gives it definition. It really gives it segmentation. I don't like how the legs are, so I pushed it down. I'm pushing it down some more. Well, I'm missing. I can see I didn't get enough color on there, and so I've got to get my marker again and color up that piece of the abdomen. And I wiped off the eyes accidentally bumping into it. So just taking my marker and putting a little black on that burnt melted mono for the eyes. Now this is UV Knot Sense, and I'm going to put a thick coating of UV resin on it. Now I like this stuff because when it cures, it doesn't have a tack to it, and it's probably one of, not, I know it's not the cheapest, but one of the cheapest UV resins, and it keeps forever. I've got some tubes that are 10 years old. So what I do is I put it on the sides first and then go down the middle. And what happens, I can push it around quite a bit, but it's self-leveling, meaning it'll flow into a really nice shape. And harden it or cure it now with my UV flashlight. Now this will take more than even a minute. You got to go 2 or 3 minutes with this thing, but I'm not going to do that here. This will cure it enough so that I can still handle it. But then I would take this same Scud and put it under my little, what I call my Easy Bake Oven, which is for nails, women's nails. And I'll put it in there and I'll cook it in there for 2 or 3 minutes. I'm just brushing out my legs right now. Now you could mix in, since you're making a dubbing loop, you could mix in, I'll mix in a little bit of UV ice dub in there to give it some sparkle. Or I'll put 2 colors of ostrich roll. That's basically my pregnant Scud.